by the cooperative blue triangle. So the farmers don't need to be able to read. We also had to solve problems like connectivity. So in a lot of the areas we work, the farmers either don't have signal all the time, or maybe they do have signal, but they can't always afford to pay for a data plan and get topped up. And so we built in a number of features into the platform, and that's specifically designed to make sure that it works for everybody. By doing that, we're addressing a market of about roughly 500 million smallholder farmers. Just using the UN FAO statistics, there's about 570 million farmers in the world. But 70 million of those farmers are the ones we recognize in Australia. They're, quite a few acres, and they've got machinery and they've got technology. They're sophisticated farmers. About 500 million of the farmers, or 500 million people, are very small, what FAO would call micro farmers. A couple of acres of land, only earning a few dollars a day, often in a really remote region. And they're the ones that we really targeted, because they are the ones that we felt were being left behind and needed a solution specifically designed to them. So we tried to tailor that. And then the most important thing that we did was we got out in the field. We sent John the lawyer to live in a village in Kenya. He lived in a house with no proper floor and showered under a hose for a whole year. That's another key bit of advice. Whenever you start a company, the first thing you do is you send your lawyer to the farthest end of the world, because they're much better out of contact with anyone. So we sent John out there. He lived and worked with the farmers. I spent a lot of time in New Guinea, and we did other projects in Myanmar and then Ethiopia and a few other countries. So we really got connected with the farmers, because the other interesting problem you have particularly with a technology startup venture, if you're dealing with people that aren't used to what you're providing them before, it's very hard to get feedback from them. So a lot of our farmers, you'd give them the original version of our application and they'd be, oh, this is great, got something, but they wouldn't tell you what was wrong with it. The only way you could really find out what's wrong with them was sitting down with them, having a few drinks over dinner, talking to them afterwards, or going out in the field with them, seeing what they were doing. And then you see when the farmer's actually struggling with something, and then you can say, oh, maybe there's something not working or something they don't understand, because they viewed us as sort of the technology experts. And so if there's something they didn't understand or wasn't quite working right for them, their reaction was to assume it was something they were doing wrong rather than telling us about it. So it took us quite a few years to learn how to make the application work all over the world. And those kind of the main lessons about how to build both a company and a solution that suits someone. Pick a market that doesn't have something that works for them. Spend a lot of time with those people to really understand what they're doing and make something that solves a very real problem. I'd say those are the 3 tenets of a successful company. If you do that, pretty much anything is going to be successful.
So it is said that you have 4 pillars of AgUnity: blockchain, partnership, network, and framework of trust. What importance do these pillars have in your process?
I think blockchain probably snuck in there, actually. Blockchain, in my view, is just a technology. We have a very good use of it, but it's really just a technology. And you could have done, most of the things you do with blockchain, you could do it another way if you really wanted to. The other ones are absolutely important. So the framework of trust is fundamental. And it is the primary thing that often holds back small farming communities around the world. We've done projects for thousands of farmers now, and we see this problem time and time again, that a farmer won't hand over their crop because they're not sure if they're getting the right price. They won't hand it over because they're not sure if someone's going to pay them later. They're not sure if when they order, say, some fertilizer, if they're getting it at the right price or things like that. Once you create transparency and trust in that community, everything starts to work. In a couple of our communities, we've seen the farmer's income go up by as much as 3 times in a single season. And it's not because of what we want to do. What we do is the way they solve the problem, but it's really the farmers solving the problem themselves. And they do that because they can work together as a group and trust each other. And that's what our application does. It means if a farmer, if I'm a farmer and I'm handing my cocoa beans or my coffee over to the cooperative, I tell them when I'm coming in, so I've coordinated to stop waste. I use the phone for that. I also, when I come to the cooperative, I show them while I'm handing over my coffee beans. They might weigh them. They'll show me how much they've recorded, and we do those transactions back to back. So both the farmer and the cooperative or the buyer or the washing station or whatever situation it is, everybody's got the same record. As soon as you have that, everybody has trust, because the farmer knows I'm not going to come back 3 days later and you're going to tell me, oh, you're getting a little best price, or you had a lower weight or something like that. They've got the record at the time. That creates trust. And you see that even once you do that, even other things that we're not recording, they start to act more trustworthy towards each other. Once you have that trust, you get cooperation in the group. Once you have a small group of farmers cooperating, they can buy and sell together, they can help solve each other problems, and the whole community will start to flourish. So that's so important. The next one, as you said, is network. Now, the network is the key. That's what trust enables. It allows the farmers to work together with others and interact. It allows them to coordinate, and it allows them to be able to work together to help each other. So that network is the most important thing. And then you've got a group of farmers, and previously they might have been selling coffee beans ad hoc. Now you've got a whole group that are making regular deliveries of coffee beans. The cooperative knows how much they've got coming in, so that becomes a reliable supplier. Then you've got a whole lot of partners that can help. So now we can bring in someone like World Food Programme, who might help them increase the grade and find them buyers. We can actually go directly to the big coffee buyers. We've just done that in Australia with one of our Ethiopian coffee unions. We've arranged them to sell their coffee directly into a supply chain in Australia for a much better price. And previously they just couldn't have done that. They weren't organized enough. They couldn't get a reliable sample. And now they've got a direct shipment all the way from across the world into a coffee chain. And then we bring in other partners, like companies that want to sell products into those farmers. So, the farming community, they need things for their farm, but they also need things like solar kits. They need things like water filters. They need things like books and educational programs for their kids. And the organizations that sell those products normally have a very hard time selling those into the most remote regions. They can sell them in the cities and urban areas very easily, but it's very hard to sell them in those areas. When we did our first project in Papua New Guinea, we only had 28 farmers in it, and we made available solar kits so they could order through the platform. Just, they click on the button and they could see a few kits and they ordered them. We actually had over 100 orders from just those 28 farmers because they were ordering them for their neighbors and everything. And so that solar company, they were super happy. They'd suddenly sold 100 kits into an area they really didn't even know existed before. The farmers got much cheaper solar kits because they were buying them in bulk through the cooperative. The cooperative made some money, and so everybody benefits. And a whole lot of farmers stopped using kerosene lamps and having their kids studying by kerosene lamps, and they're all now on solar. So the whole village is lit up at night and they've got power to charge their phones and everything. So we see that a lot. It works the same with like farm tools, water filters, lots of other things that we can deliver into the farming communities. And then finally, the other partnerships that are so important is the financial ones, the banks, the microloan facilities and insurance, which some of us in the developed world and even in the developing world, we see those as self-evident. Like I can go and open a bank account, or I can get a loan if I need something, or I can pay for some insurance for my house. If you're a really smallholder farmer, most of the world, those things are just not open to you at all. And so we found with the communities of farmers, once we get them using the phone to record handing over crops and get paid, one of the first behaviors they often do is say, I don't want to get all my cash right away. And that's particularly common for women farmers. And very interestingly, around the world, a slight majority of the farmers, about 55%, are actually women. So women are the majority of the smallholder farmers. And they often have a very common problem that they'll sell all their coffee beans and they'll be coming back to the village with what to them is a huge amount of money. And then all the village will turn up and they want to have a party and the next day it's gone. And so particularly for women farmers and certain other groups as well, it's very important that they can keep the money away safely. But previously they didn't really see the need for a bank account because that means they'd have to go into town every time they needed some money and get it out. Now we have the facility that the farmer can receive their cocoa, put their cocoa beans or coffee or fish or whatever into the cooperative. They can get paid. They've got a transaction that's on their phone, and then they can go and get it bit by bit when they need it. And that means they're not bringing $100 back to the village and causing a big problem. They're just either paying for something when they need it, or they're bringing $10 or $20 back, which is a safer amount when they need it. So that becomes very important. But that leads to the farmers then wanting to have bank accounts. Plus, we've got the records of that farmer. They're handing over cocoa beans every month for 8 months of the year. We know that's a reliable person. We know they've got a farm. We know they're always earning money. So that person can now get a microloan. And now they can loan money if they need to expand their farm or if they have a problem. It's possible for them to get a loan at a reasonable rate from a proper financier. Because in most of the world, when these small farmers need a loan, they go to a very dodgy person. USAID actually analysed this, and they found that the major cause in the world of human trafficking is micro farmers' lack of credit. What happens is, the farmer gets into debt, the loan sharks are connected to the human trafficker, and eventually the daughter goes off into slavery to pay off the debt. And it's very well organised that that's how the situation goes. As soon as that farmer can get a reasonable loan from someone who's not going to be predatory, his whole life can change. And when a bad situation happens, he can resolve it. And insurance is just as important. So we've got organisations that do sort of insurance saving services, and the farmers can connect to that. So that's where the partnerships all come in. You create the community, you create the trust, you create the community and team, and then you bring in the partners and all those other organisations that want to interact with those farming communities.
So it is a struggle for founders to identify people with right talent and passion, right, who can travel with them for the startup journey. So how did you assemble your team?
Sure. So it actually came in 2 phases with us. When we started, because I'd had startup companies in the past and they were relatively successful, I had a number of people that heard what we're doing and said, oh, I want to be in on this as well. So that's always very helpful. Having reputation and credibility that when you do something, it all comes down to the founder being a trustworthy and reliable person that delivers on what they think. If that happens, people will know you and they'll want to join it. The other most important thing is to have a big vision. It's very easy for AgUnity to recruit people because we've got this great story of we're helping lift thousands at the moment, but ultimately we'll lift millions of people out of poverty. And that's a wonderful thing to be involved in. And so that attracts people that come from, our CTO, for example. He used to earn $250,000 at an investment bank. He loves to come to work with us and works for a fraction of that. And he just loves what he's doing because he's doing something good in the world and he wants to tell his kids and grandchildren, I did this, I was a part of that. So having that really big, inspiring vision and a grand mission is so important for your recruitment efforts as you go along through a company.
According to UN, ethical business and investment are essential to achieve transformational change that will ensure peaceful, stable societies. What is AgUnity's pledge towards this?
Yes, look, we thoroughly agree with that. And AgUnity has built a lot of facets into what we've done to make sure that we always act ethically. When we set up a digital token for doing rewarding directly for farmers, we set that up fully as an arm's length foundation, and we follow all those sustainable goals. What's most interesting is that since we've been in business, like when AgUnity first started back in 2016, these things weren't so forefront as they are today. We sort of evolved in the time where we've seen more and more companies want to be known as an ethical business, want to operate an ethical way, want to make sure they're doing the right things in the world. So we've sort of evolved in a situation where that theme has become more and more mainstream, and more businesses want to operate in that way. So I would encourage everyone who's looking to start a business or operate in a business to think that as time goes on, those things become more and more important to you. If you're known as a business that's ethical, like we've won, kindness awards, we've won ethical business awards, so obviously we're doing something right. But it's those things you don't do overnight. Those things are part of the DNA of your company. And the more you do them, the longer you do them for, the more organizations know they can trust you, the more they come to you, and the more they're willing to support and help you grow as a business, because they know, well, if we help AgUnity, they'll do the right thing by us. If we give them this project, they'll complete it. And sometimes you have to take some hits. Like we've had a number of projects where we've, for whatever reason, like underquoted on or something, and we've ended up like losing lots of money on projects. Now that's a hard thing to do as a startup, but when you get yourself in that position and then you do the right thing by your partners, often that comes back to you in other ways, whether it's that partner or another company. That ethical behavior and that being good to your word always has good returns in my book.
During the pandemic, were there any hiccups that you faced? Can you share some instances?
Oh, definitely. So the pandemic was both a challenge and an opportunity to us. So firstly, the challenge previously, we had a team that were mostly based in Indonesia. And when we'd do a project in, say, Ethiopia, that team would go out and do the training and do all the work on the ground. Well, come COVID, we can't fly people around the world anymore. All the borders slammed shut. So we had to become really good at hiring people in country and training them in country and then working with them remotely. And that's not a skill you develop overnight. It's a very, very hard thing to do, particularly with people for training developing world farmers. But over time, we learned how to do it. We learned what people to hire. We learned how to train them. We learned how to remotely sort of mentor them in those projects. And I think as a result, our company became so much better at what we do, because now we've got people in 19 countries, but all the like developing countries that we work in, so Ethiopia, Ghana, Kenya, we had people in Uganda until the project stopped there, Papua New Guinea, Indonesia, Vietnam, we've got people in all those places. They are local people, they're part of our team, and they do those deployments, but they also bring ideas. They also give us that diversity of experience that tells us, hey, in Vietnam, I think we should do this, or in Ghana, I think this is really important. And we get a lot of ideas and inspiration from those people. So it's a very hard thing to do, to run a diversified team all around the world. It takes a lot of discipline and you have to learn a whole lot of new processes to do it. But once you get able to do that, it really enriches the company. So that was a challenge, but it was one that ended up being really good for AgUnity. The opportunities that came from COVID was because in a lot of countries, COVID disrupted the food supply chains. And so, and that's, I think probably the best example in the world of that is Sri Lanka at the moment. So as everyone's probably seen in the news, Sri Lanka is going through terrible turmoil, but it actually started right at the beginning of COVID, where they had some restrictions on fertilizer supplies, and Sri Lanka's agricultural production just fell off a cliff. They're producing substantially less than they used to. And so there's a great opportunity in Sri Lanka to not do, every time there's a humanitarian crisis, the world typically does the same thing. They wait till it's too late and then they rush to supply food and things into the country. We're very fortunate in Sri Lanka that we kind of see this problem coming. So what we're now trying to do is reach into that country, get a lot of farmers onto the platform, and for them to be able to coordinate with the farmers what food to grow, help them grow newer crops, and help them get those crops to people that need it in the country. So instead of waiting till the disaster and you've got people starving, let's make sure that we do the most with the resources we have in the country. And then let's make sure that what we produce gets to someone, it doesn't get wasted, because the more developing country is, the more food often goes to waste, and just because of supply chain inefficiencies. And then also let's make sure that those farmers that are in the country, if they need fertilizer or new seeds, they've got a way of communicating that, because you've often got a farmer that's got land, they can't grow the crop they used to on it. If they could grow, say, pumpkins, that might be a really good crop for them, but they can't find pumpkin seeds. So it works in a two-directional way, and we've been very fortunate that some of the Australian cricket team have, because they've been recently in Sri Lanka, they're aware of this problem, and they're very supportive of us. And so we should have some messages going out on media saying, let's not do what we always do and send aid at the last minute. Let's try to help the country fix its problem at the root cause. And so we'll be doing that in a few countries. I don't think Sri Lanka is alone in this. I think a lot of countries have been drastically impacted by COVID. Not as much by COVID, but by the economic impacts, the supply chain disruptions, the lack of credit, the lack of tourism, the lack of other trade businesses going on. Those things often take many years before they trickle to the surface and the country ends up in an economic crisis the way Sri Lanka has. I think lots of other countries will follow, and I think this represents a great opportunity, not just for AgUnity, but for lots of organizations to do more to help countries fix these problems at a grassroots level. And when you fix it at a grassroots level, it means that it's much less likely that problem's going to reoccur. If we can bring countries like Sri Lanka so they produce enough food themselves, in the future, if there's another crisis, at least the food won't be such a major issue for them.
What legacy would you like to leave behind in the world?
Look, so I worked in banking for quite a while at Goldman Sachs and Lehman Brothers. So my legacy needs to be something else, because after working in there for a long time, I realized that banks don't really do anything good for the world. And so now my legacy or AgUnity's legacy and mine are just the same. AgUnity wants to eventually reach millions of farmers and enable them to lift themselves out of poverty. We don't take credit for doing it. Like, we give them the tools and they lift themselves out of poverty. And we would like that number to be in the millions of people that we see going from extreme poverty to having a sustainable, healthy lifestyle. And I think within the next 5 or 10 years, we'll hit that number.
Okay, so let's open the session for audience Q&A.
Good morning, sir.
Hi, sir. Myself, Divya. I'm pursuing my second semester MBA. So my question is, everyone in a company is responsible for words, actions, and commitments. How do you drive the accountability?
Oh, in the company? Yeah, that's interesting. We have, and that's an interesting problem, but one that doesn't exist for us as much as it does in other companies. So like I said, I used to work in investment banking. It's very, very hard for everyone in the company to be accountable in an organization that without hard rules and KPIs and a lot of measurement and things. With a company like AgUnity, our situation is very special because everyone is very committed to the mission and the vision and what we're doing. And so when you have that sort of a strong story behind a company, you don't really have so much problem, because people in AgUnity, they don't come to work because they're earning a salary. I mean, they earn a salary and they're all well paid and everything, but they come to work because they feel they're playing a part in helping eventually helping millions of people lift themselves out of poverty. And that's a bigger mission. And I think when a company has that sort of mission, you really don't have such a problem with accountability and roles, because people are enthusiastic, they come to work, they want to do it. And then what the problem really becomes is communicating to people what the big objectives are. And we have a structured agile system that's sort of based around, we run it in Asana, but we actually have like sort of company goals. and then people all jump in on board and achieving the company goals. So to answer your question, there's two things. One is have that really strong vision about what you're doing, and that's much more easy in a company that's doing something philanthropic, and then communicate to everyone what the company goals are and let them know what their part is in that. Because if people are motivated and they know what the company is trying to do, they'll just jump on it, and personal responsibility becomes a much lesser issue. In a commercial organization, it's a really big problem, and you often have to have very structured means to track everyone according to their goals.
Thank you so much, sir.
Hello, sir. My name is Pratish. I had a question for you.
Go ahead.
So, how do you embed quality? How do you embed quality in your work, sir?
How do I say? Could you repeat?
How do you embed quality in your work? How do you embed quality in your work?
Oh, quality. Yes, that's. I think actually I'm not going to. We've solved that fairly well in AgUnity, and I'm going to actually go back to a situation we had at Lehman Brothers when I was running a team there, and quite a few of my team were actually based in Chennai, and we had serious quality issues in that company. How we got around that was by creating a regular meeting with my team. And this was really important for the team in Chennai, because normally they were left isolated, like they were doing their work and they developed something. And if it didn't work properly or the customer wasn't happy, they sort of got that feedback secondhand. We changed that to where we had a regular interaction between the users and the developers or the business analysts or the people doing the work. And that completely changed things, because what it meant was then if you developed some poor work, you heard it directly from the users why they thought it was poor. And people became much more conscientious. So I think that person-to-person connection is the most critical thing in requiring quality, because it makes you feel like if you didn't do something well, you hear it from the person, not because they're complaining to you, but not because they're criticizing you or complaining to you, but because you feel like what pain it caused them. So if I see, for example, in the division I ran in Lehman Brothers was Treasury, which finances the bank. And if, say, the Treasury function couldn't clear their accounts on one particular day because something wasn't working, the development team heard about that and they go, oh, okay, yeah, we made a mistake in our development, and this has caused these other people to have to go through days or spend weekends, manually clearing amounts in accounts. If we had done our job a bit better, we would have saved them that pain. And so it's that personal-to-person connection that gives you that feeling why quality is so important. And when teams are disconnected and they don't really deal with the users, it's very, very easy to build something that's bad quality and not really know why that was important to someone else. So I think that's the predominant way, and AgUnity does that sort of naturally, because we have to deal with farmers who it's often very difficult to understand their needs. So we have a whole team that spends a lot of time in the field with them, and they communicate directly with the development team. And so we have that interaction going very, very well. But I think it's much better example to talk about how we solved that problem at Lehman Brothers, because we went from being, having users that were always complaining about the quality to being, I would hope, what we were regarded in the end as one of the best teams in Lehman Brothers for the quality of output. Like the users knew if they asked for something, development team were all over it. The development team felt really appreciated, because when they did something well, when they did something bad, they'd hear about it. But when they did something that was high quality, the users were all over them. Like, this was great. You really saved us a lot of effort. And then people would actually work harder and focus more on what they were doing in order to achieve that quality outcome.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning, sir. My name is Aditi. So with the technology constantly being improved and innovated upon, how would you go on optimizing your offerings?
Oh, we're always optimizing. We work in a very agile way. So we, for anyone that's familiar with agile development, you create something quick and you're continually running a list of the most important things and updating it. And if you do that properly, and we're very fortunate that we've recruited extremely high level people that had run quite massive teams in the past through this mechanism. Some of our team members have had teams of, I'm going to say, close to 100 people through that sort of agile process. So they're really experienced at doing it well. I think once you create an agile process, you have a very iterative, you never try to think too many steps ahead. You look at the product as you have it now, create the list of the things that need to be done the most urgently, take them back to the users, make sure they're prioritized, and then anything that wasn't on the priority, that goes on the next list. So that agile process leads to really good quality and responsiveness and matching what the users require. I think it's almost impossible, particularly with what we do, to try to preempt what the users want, because so many times you start to build something and then halfway through it, you find out it's not really what they wanted, particularly in our case, because not only the farmers, but also certain organizations that we deal with, I won't name them, but they're our customers are fairly well known. So some of those customers, they really don't know what they want. They'll give us requirements and they're completely different to what is really functional. And we manage to weed that out by just going step by step, build the basic, go back to them with a few suggestions, get those prioritized, build those, and then often you find, yeah, we didn't really need to do that. But you didn't spend months building something that ended up as a white elephant in.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Good morning, sir. My name is Mitravinda, and my question is, while working remotely, how do you empower your team?
Cool. Look, I think empowerment's not only remotely, it's about, firstly, it's a little bit about filtering the people. Like some people can work, some people are suitable working remotely or locally. Some people really need to be in a community. But once you have the right people, we just naturally empower everyone. We try to hire people who are suitable to be empowered, and then we trust them to do their job. We trust them to do feedback. And most importantly, we trust them to make mistakes. If you come down on people who, do something on their own initiative and it doesn't turn out to be right, if you chastise them or make them feel bad about those situations, then people won't do it. You've got to empower people. You say, you've got the right to take this risk. You've got the right to take this initiative or have a new idea or try something new with the farmers. And if it fails, we're not going to complain to you. We're just going to talk to you about how you could do it better next time and encourage you to next time think a little bit more about it, but try it again and fail. And so, yeah, encouraging people, telling people that they're empowered is vitally important, but it goes hand in hand with encouraging them to fail and being accepting of them when they're failing, and almost applauding people who did try and failed, because you know that if they keep doing that, they'll eventually get gooder. And that's the key to empowerment in my view.
Thank you so much, sir.
Hello, sir. I'm Divya again. What do you think, what are the different kind of infrastructural need that you foresee?
Oh, infrastructure. So for AgUnity, it's very simple. The technology infrastructure is built on a cloud service and blockchain. That's, those things are commodities nowadays. Like we can run up additional services on Amazon or AWS or Microsoft Azure within hours, I think. So those things, you can just get them anywhere. The resourcing on the farmers, like one of the most important things that has to happen around the world, but it's a bit of a chicken and egg thing, is there needs to be better connectivity to everyone in the world. But the problem the telcos have, and we know this very, very well, is the telcos don't always make money out of the rural areas, because if you stick up a cell phone tower in a rural area, which costs them tens of thousands of dollars, it might be years before enough people use that service to make it worth them putting that telco tower up there. So what you need to do at the other end of that is you need to have lots of farmers with phones with applications that are useful for them, so that when a telco does put a tower up so they have good signal and good connectivity, people are actually using that service. And once you do that, that opens up to the rest of the world all these modern connectivity internet services that we take for granted. So you have to go hand in hand with the telecommunications infrastructure, the phone infrastructure. And then what I always find fascinating is once you've done that, a lot of the other infrastructure things, they just solve themselves. It's amazing, like we see farmers in the highlands of New Guinea where there's no roads. Once they're actually regularly able to sell their coffee beans, for example, the farmers will start repairing the road by themselves, or they'll go to the local government office and they'll say, we're continually getting stuck on this road. We need to now, we need you to help us improve the road. People are very resourceful in solving problems once they understand it. And the key is once they're all connected, they can understand that that problem is not just theirs, but this is 1,000 farmers that are growing coffee in this region. We all need to get our coffee into this local town. And so we need to build some roads, or we need to improve the telecom network, or we may need to make sure there's power out there for the dry or the washing station. And so all those sort of things, I'd like to trust the farmers to solve them themselves, because literally every time we've managed to empower a community by getting them connected and trusting, we just step back and watch them solve a lot of their problems themselves. And then there's a lot of organizations around the world, from the aid organizations like USAID and GIZ and others, and to the ones that are very specific like World Food Programme, to a lot of the impact investment funds. There's tons of help for these things. All it requires is people to be able to explain the problem, quantify it, and say, look, we need $1 million to build this road, or we need this and this and this. If they can do that, nowadays, that money is almost always available. There's almost always someone will come up. The reason it doesn't happen is because those groups can't always demonstrate that they've got a large enough group of people, or what they're doing is important enough, or be able to explain what they really need, because they don't always know it. Once they're connected and working together, so often you'll see these problems just solve themselves.
Thank you, sir.
If another wants to enter this field, what sort of preparations would you suggest is required? Any particular skills that you would suggest?
To enter in which field? To be an entrepreneur?
Yeah, entrepreneur in agricultural field.
Oh, in agriculture and entrepreneur. Agriculture is tricky because you do need to have a bit understanding of farming. Like, I couldn't have been as effective as what I did if I didn't spend the time in UNESCO. So you have to really understand the community you're working in, and you probably need to have a bit of experience, or at least a little bit of exposure to what life is like in the farming community. It's the same in solving any problem. You need to know what it is. And then in terms of being entrepreneurial in general, I think the key is your first venture is very likely not going to succeed. Your second venture probably won't succeed either. It's a matter of having that persistence. Like, you learn by making mistakes. So trying something, doing it, getting out there going, I had the wrong partner, or I didn't properly protect my intellectual property, or I wasn't able to get investment because I didn't describe it properly, or I didn't do my books well enough, so that helped me get investment. Most of those things, with all due respect, I know you're all doing an MBA course, but they're not the things you learn in the MBA. Those are the things you learn by getting out there, taking a risk, trying to do a business, having it not work out so well. But once you've done that, you're so much better to do it the second time. And it probably takes a couple of attempts. It certainly did me. And certainly a lot of the other people in our company and other founders I've seen, most of them succeed after multiple attempts. It's very important to have the skills that you're taught in an MBA, because that teaches you some of the fundamentals to be able to fix problems and work around things, but nothing beats that experience. So it's complementary to do both those. And so if I was to recommend an important pathway, I would say it's a good idea for everyone to at some stage join or volunteer with a startup company, just so you get a little bit of exposure to what's going on in those ventures. And you can learn a lot of that without, being in the hot seat yourself, because, there's not many things as stressful in the world as being a CEO of a startup company, believe me. It's much better if you see other people facing that pain first, and you can be a little bit more better suited to deal with it yourself when your time comes.
Thank you.
So David, I have one, actually it's a two-pronged question. So you said that you came in from working with two banks, right? And then you moved into AgUnity. So what I want to understand is, how was that transition for you? Because there are people who might not really immediately start off being an entrepreneur. But after a few years of experience in the industry, in whatever industry they get into, they might realizing, I want to start off a venture, and they transition, right? So how is it for you? What challenges did you face?
That's a very deep and diverse question.
Can you just walk us through a bit?
It's going to take a little bit to unpack it. So look, my situation is very strange, because I sort of come from farming. I'd spent time around the world. I'd had companies before I was in banking, and then I ended up in banking by a bit of an accident. So I'd had a company in Japan. Actually, my company in Japan was called Medisys. We made, Japan had web browsing phones before anyone else, and we made a middleware product, and that caused my company to get acquired and becomes quite successful. So I'd had that company, I sold it, and then I was doing really nothing. And a friend from Goldman Sachs, which was previous my customer, said, do you want to come in and run a project? And I said, no, I'll just do it myself. And then that project actually won the Goldman Sachs Global Innovation Award the next year. So it turned out to be a pretty successful project, and they still use it. So I didn't end up in investment banking by any normal mechanism. And I'm probably a person that should never been in investment banking, because the way I like to break rules and try new things and do things differently to other people. And people like that should never think about working in an investment bank. Apart from certain situations, the best pay you can earn in the world is at companies like that. They pay incredibly well, but you work really hard, but what you're doing is not really meaningful. And I think those organizations inadvertently do a lot of damage in the world. And so I worked there for a long time, and a couple of the other founders of AgUnity also worked in investment banking. So to me, I'd sort of come full circle. I'd done some startup businesses. I'd gone to investment banking. I'd earned very good money for a while, but then I'd gone, this isn't really doing anything important. I don't want to be doing this. And so we'd already started to do another startup company, and then AgUnity came about through the story that I told by accident. And we looked at it and go, are you going to build a technology for banking or help millions of developing world farmers? It's not really a choice, right? So I ended up in that pathway by accident. Very few people ever managed to make it out of banking, simply because you take a massive salary hit when you go out of banking into another role. And most people that survive in that environment, probably only 50% of people that get hired into Goldman Sachs last more than a few years. They either can't take the work, or they just not really, they can't deal with that, the social or the work pressures or things like that in it, and they get farmed out. So it's a very cutthroat environment. People don't last very long at it. The ones that do rarely move on, because they're going to take a big salary sacrifice. And also there's another very interesting cultural aspect. And I noticed this when I went to New York. I went to New York a lot with both Goldman and Lehman. And people there earn, they're on average of, vice presidents are earning 400, 500,000 a year, and on average. They have the most ridiculous lifestyle. They live in an apartment in central New York. They rent private jets to go on holidays because they don't want to wait at JFK to get on a normal flight. They're earning 400 and 500,000, but they're probably saving nothing or getting into debt, just because all the other people around them have this ridiculously high spending lifestyle. It's kind of a cultural trap. And when you move out of that, it's very hard to adapt to being a normal person again, because you're used to having an expensive apartment, you're used to going on private jets, you're used to going on really exotic locations, and they don't realize that none of those things are really important. Like, I've been on holidays with these people, and it's no better than a scuba diving holiday that I'd go on for a tenth of the price. And so a lot of the things that the people around you appreciate and hold as valuable, you pick up off them. And one of the very important things of sort of finding your own place in the world is deciding what is important to you and what really matters, and valuing those things more than what the people around you do. So that I think is the interesting element to understanding cultural norms. Like, if you're on an MBA course, you'll all be sharing similar values, and because you're spending money for your education, you'll be in a similar financial situation. When you move into another environment, that changes. It's very important to weigh the difference in that and understand what's important. And I think a lot of people go through life without ever reflecting on that, and often end in careers for many decades that they might not be suited to, or just because they never stop to think about it.
Yeah, thank you so much, David.
Hope that covered some of it.
Mr. David, it was an honor to share this platform with you today. Thank you for taking your time and sharing your experience with us. On behalf of the Department of Management Studies, Dayananda Sagar College of Engineering, we thank management of DACE and the principal, Dr. CPS Prakash, and our beloved HOD, Dr. KG Hemalata, for giving us this opportunity, and our faculty members for their constant support. We once again thank you all for joining us today.
Also, I'd actually just like to add a very small thing. While yes, we really appreciate David giving his time out to us and sharing his journey with us. I would also like to thank Sunil as well, who has really been very patient with me, trying to answer my entire chain of emails as well. And thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to interact with you today. Thank you so much.
Oh, I'm most grateful, and yeah. I'm glad you pointed out Sunil, because our company wouldn't function without him. Like many of the people, we couldn't get anything organized without him. I was just going to say, if anyone wants any follow-up, you do have Sunil on the thing. You'll reach him much quicker than me, and he'll be able to forward any questions you have to the relevant person in the company, and any interaction you want with AgUnity. We're always happy to talk to people and help, particularly students with ideas and things. So feel free to reach out to us with anything you might want.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, David, for your insightful, your experience for insightful journey with us. And it's very really appreciable that you come forward and share with our students and your faculty member. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sunil, for the successful coordination also. Thank you, faculty members.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
And, yeah, it's a pleasure. Yeah. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Have a lovely day, everyone.